Let me tell you how it really went down because you probably think you know this story, right? A bunch of Detroit's so-called brightest, an ocean of suits and starch collars, all crowding into that glossy, Sterling Aerospace Hall for another big show. They expected to see a legend, maybe a scandal, maybe just someone crash and burn. But nobody was ready for Eleanor Mitchell, not even close. You could say her first step onto that stage was the kind of entrance people only remember because it upends everything they think they know ya. That happened. Picture her, their simple white shirt, faded jeans, sneakers that had seen more miles than most people in that room could ever count, standing like a wildflower among marble statues. She looked at the R7000 engine, a beast of metal and ambition that had chewed up 3 days of MIT brainpower and spit it out in frustration. Richard Sterling, the top dog, smirked with a kind of arrogance you only get when you're born of money, grabbed the mic, and started his act because that's what it was, theater. This woman thinks she can do what my best engineers couldn't. No degree, no credentials. Just delusion. Then, like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, he chucked a wrench at her feet. 30 minutes, he said, fix it, or leave forever. The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It was the kind that tastes like rust in your mouth. Eleanor, hands trembling just enough for the vultures to notice, bent down and picked up the wrench. But nobody in that room knew who she really was. Not the ones laughing, not the ones filming for their blogs, not the ones already drafting their clever headlines. And what would you do if it were you, right there in her shoes? Stand your ground? Walk away? Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't facing a room full of doubters, it's deciding when to show the world what you're really made of. Now, if you ever drove past the east side of Detroit at dawn, you might have caught a glimpse of Eleanor's apartment, a place where the hum of industry never really sleeps and the wind whistles through tired window panes. Her mornings started early, with bitter black coffee in a chipped mug, her gaze fixed on a city that didn't care who you were yesterday. To her neighbors, she was just the quiet one from the library, helping kids with their homework, never causing a fuss. She wore the same white shirts from the discount bin, the same ponytail, no jewelry, no makeup, nothing to catch the light, nothing to remember her by. Mrs. Henderson next door would gossip. Seems like a nice woman, but there's something heavy in her eyes. And she wasn't wrong. Grief leaves fingerprints you can't scrub away. What none of them knew was Eleanor's pasta past most folks would have plastered on their resumes in 24-point bold. See, not long ago, she'd applied at Sterling Aerospace. Not as a chief engineer, not even as a designer, just a basic technician. When the hiring manager asked about her training, she just shrugged. I learn with my hands, she said, eyes steady. Fixed cars, worked in garages all over town. No papers, no diplomas justgrit. They doubted her, of course. That's the world we live in. But when it came time to prove herself, Eleanor finished their practical test faster than anyone else, found problems their best guys didn't even know existed. Word got around fast. Some said she was a fluke, a lucky guess. Others whispered about the mystery woman with golden hands. That's how she wound up on that stage's setup, plain and simple, rigged to see her fail. Richard Sterling wanted a public shaming, not a new hire. But Eleanor? She saw it all coming. She'd been through worse. 5 years earlier, her name had been lit up in the Johnson Space Center Auditorium, DR. Eleanor Mitchell, youngest chief engineer on NASA's Orion project. She'd stood at that podium in a Navy suit, the world cheering, the future wide open. By her side was Daniel Walsh, fiancé, partner, the man she thought she'd spend her life with. Together, they'd cracked the impossible. Her propulsion system would take us to Mars. They were supposed to get married the next week, file their joint patent tomorrow. But fate has a way of twisting the knife. That night, she caught Daniel stealing her research, selling it off for a cool $50 million. Nobody's going to believe you did this, he laughed. He set her up, torched the lab, framed her as the thief. She lost everything: her career, her reputation, her health, and the use of her right hand. NASA kicked her out quietly. Daniel vanished into corporate glory. So when she saw the R7000 engine at Sterling, her own design, but warped, broken, dangerous, her blood ran cold. It was like seeing a ghost, one she'd never buried. She could have walked away. Maybe she should have. But if that engine failed in the sky, people would die. She wouldn't let that happen, no matter what it cost. The crowd jeered, mocked her damaged hand, doubted every move she made. Richard Sterling strutted, hungry for her humiliation. His engineers sneered, threw MIT rings around like gold medals. And just as the tension hit its peak, Eleanor went quiet, her mind humming like a finely tuned engine. 20 minutes left. Her hands flew over the machine, mapping every deviation. 10 minutes. Sterling taunted her, called her out. 5 minutes. Eleanor straightened up, turned to the crowd, and asked for a micromotor and a calibration kit named the exact models. The shift in the room was electric. She found a flaw nobody else had, pointed it out in front of everyone. At cruising altitude, this thing would explode a death trap. Impossible, the engineers scoffed. But Eleanor kept going, reciting numbers only the original designer could know. In 5 minutes, she recalibrated the engine, fixed the fatal flaw, and started it up. It roared to life, flawless. The diagnostic screen glowed green across the board. That's when the room went dead silent. "Who are you?" someone whispered. Eleanor rolled up her sleeve, revealing the scars from the explosion Daniel had caused. She looked at Richard, looked at the crowd, and finally let them see the real her. "I'm the person who designed Orion. The person who warned NASA about this exact failure. The person you tried to erase." It hit them like a punch. Phones started ringing, journalists scrambling, execs panicking. Richard tried to deny it, but Eleanor showed the proof, her signature in the engine code, legal documents in hand. "Sterling Aerospace is using stolen work," she said, cool as ice, "and I could sue you for $500 million. Sterling nearly collapsed. But here's the twist. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want their money. She fixed what was broken, asked for $1 as payment, and left the rest to their conscience. You want to fix things? Start by hiring people for their passion, not their pedigree. Stop closing doors on those who don't fit your mold. One by one, the people who mocked her realized their mistake. Sarah Chun, the loudest critic, was first to apologize, tears running down her face. "Sorry doesn't fix the past," Eleanor told her, "but it can change the future." They begged her to stay, offered her any job, any title. But Eleanor just shook her head. "What you need is a new culture, not a new hero. Open your doors to the next dreamer, someone like me, but without the scars." Then, as the crowd parted, she headed for the exit, the afternoon sun cutting a golden path before her. At the threshold, she turned back, her silhouette sharp against the light. Someone once called me window, dressing pretty but pointless. But every flower has thorns, and sometimes those thorns are what keep it alive. She walked out, leaving behind a silent, humbled crowd. Some took down their diplomas, some wiped away tears, and Richard Sterling stared at the engine, his pride in ruins. Outside, Eleanor melted back into the city, not running, but finally at peace. She'd done what was right, not what was easy, and that's real strength. Monday, she'd be at the library again, helping a new generation of kids believe they could reach for Moser anywhere else they dared to dream. So, you tell me, if you were standing in her place, would you have chosen forgiveness over revenge? Would you have fixed what was broken and walked away? Or would you have burned it all down just to prove a point? Let's hear your take, because sometimes the choice you make in a moment like that says more about you than 1,000 diplomas ever could.